and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, he's afraid of water. It's Matt Freeman.
We drown.
Dumbest fucking line in the movie. Hello! Oh my gosh, this week on the show, Deconstructing Apes continues with the 6th film in the series. This one, we're fast forwarding, we're moving forward in time to the year 2001, in which Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes reboot is released. Matt, this has secretly been the one I've been looking forward to this whole time because I watched this when it came out. I kind of liked it, but also I kind of acknowledged that it was bad. And I've been really looking forward to revisiting it with you and seeing, with the first 5 films under our belt, if this was a more faithful recreation of those movies or if it's still bad. So I'm pretty excited about this.
Me too. My history with this movie is I went and saw it with my family when I was 16, and I thought it was so good that I took all my high school friends to see it in a big group. And as we were walking out of the theater, they were like, "Hey man, what the hell's wrong with you?"
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. That's great. That's great. And that's when you lost them, and that's when they never took another Matt recommendation ever again.
Yeah, definitely had to work my way out of that hole with that group of friends. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right, Matt. Let's get right into the movie and talk all about 2001's Planet of the Apes. What is this movie all about, Matt?
In 2029, an Air Force astronaut crash lands on a mysterious planet where evolved talking apes dominate a race of primitive humans.
Did you know it was 2029? That was news to me. I didn't know that.
No, I didn't notice that anywhere. I guess maybe they show it when they're doing the time travel panel, you know?
Yeah, could be. This movie was written by William Broyles Jr., Lawrence Connor, and Mark Rosenthal. 3 writers, Matt. 3 writers.
Oh,
that
yeah.
might explain.
I can totally see that, yeah.
Directed by Tim Burton, starring Mark Wahlberg, Tim Roth, Helena Bonham Carter, Michael Clark Duncan, and Paul Giamatti. And not Amber Heard, by the way, because as I said to you earlier today, I watched this whole movie thinking the one woman that's like the human love interest of Mark Wahlberg was Amber Heard. It's not. It's not Amber Heard. It looks a lot like Amber Heard, but it was Estella Warren.
All right.
Never heard of this woman before in my life.
Me neither. I don't
she
think
looks a lot like Amber Heard.
She does. I agree.
Matt, all right. So you liked the movie the first time you saw it. It's been 23 years since that moment. What did you think of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes?
I mean, it's not a good movie. It's not gonna be a big twist along the lines of like, oh wow, it held up. It did not. There were maybe a couple of bright spots centering on Paul Giamatti's performance, and then there were some bits that were so stupid and bad that I actually was amused by them, which we can talk about. But you know, it's kind of just a big old nothing of a movie. Like, it doesn't add anything on top of the mythos. It's a retread of a lot of stuff, and then there's a lot of nonsense.
It's I mean it's boring.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the thing that I kept thinking is like, this, there's nothing happening, and yet it's also like compared to the 1968 version is like going on fast forward through a lot of this stuff. And yet it felt much more boring and lifeless than that movie did.
Right. It's not that long of a movie, but it feels incredibly slow. And I think because a lot of it is just like perfunctory scenes where you really feel like somebody was going from the How to Write a Movie book where they were like, and here's where she stands up for the human to show that she's the good ape. It's like Save the Cat, you know, paint by numbers screenwriting.
Yeah.
So much of it is like that. And there's just too many characters is another thing.
There's so many characters. And so many of them don't have anything to do. I was really weirded out by some of this movie, and like, it's not even Tim Burton weirdness, which, you know, I I can get behind Tim Burton weirdness when it's good Tim Burton weirdness. We like a Tim Burton, I think still we've talked about him several times on the show, but we've never done episodes on like his good movies yet, which is
Yeah.
interesting. Um, but he had that run in the 80s of just like he was the guy. Like he was just the guy. He had this run of movies that was just one after another that was some of the best the best of its type of movie ever. And then since then, you know, we talked about Big Fish, a movie that disappointed both of us. And now we have this movie, which yeah, I'm with you on this one. This is a mess of a movie with some interesting things in it. And it makes me really want to revisit those old movies and see were we just wrong? I don't think we were, but this is like it's got a little bit of the Burton flair in that like I think the one good thing I have to say about this movie is unlike the 68 version, I think it took the idea of a society of apes and like said, I really want to like explore what life would look like in this city.
Yeah.
And we do get a lot of shots of like just apes like living their lives in the city. And we get a lot of world building around that. And I do think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's
I,
about it though.
I agree. So along those lines, I was going to say the thing that I think Burton never really lost was his attention to the visual aspect of filmmaking. And that is along the lines of, or maybe identical to what you're describing, where he pays a lot of attention to how everything looks. Everything looks really cool. The clothes the apes wear are unique. They don't look like anything else really. Even the clothes that the humans wear are sort of like post-apocalyptic chic, but not in a boring, normal sort of like loincloth way.
Sure. Yeah.
And then the architecture is cool. The art is cool. Like I actually genuinely like the I don't know what the word is, the intro to the movie where it's that very sort of staccato Danny Elfman music with like the vase where you've got like the two like monkeys, the two apes that are like screaming at each other in the
Yeah.
on the art. It's a cool design. It's like visually arresting, cool music. It's like, oh, this is gonna be tight, and then it isn't.
Mhm.
But I think this is my complaint about Tim Burton really is like he isn't actually that good of a storyteller or director. He just is really good at visuals.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, this is a aside, but like I do think Edward Scissorhands is a good movie. I do think Beetlejuice is a good movie.
Yeah.
I do think The Nightmare Before Christmas is a good movie, although he had less to do with that than I used to think.
Yeah. And
Um
the Batmans
and
are good movies as
and the
well.
yeah, so I think maybe I don't know. I don't have a grand theory of Tim Burton, but this is one of his bad ones where it's just very
Well, they've all been bad ones. Like
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
not all. Obviously, past a certain date, they've just all been bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I'm just going to use the word perfunctory again. So like the whole
Yeah.
movie felt like casting Mark Wahlberg is the perfect epitome of the perfunctoriness where it's like you've got to cast a lead actor. Well, he's a lead actor. There's no he has no charisma in this role. It's not the funny thing is it's not that Mark Wahlberg has no charisma as an actor. It's that in this role he could be replaced by a piece of cardboard on a stick. You would lose no drama.
It's awful. And yeah, I mean, like I like Mark Wahlberg. I think Mark Wahlberg in the roles that really play to his strengths are very good. I think he's a very funny actor when he's in comedies.
Mhm.
I enjoyed him in Shyamalan's The Happening, not because he was right for the part, but almost because I think he was by design exactly wrong for the part of a high school science teacher is like not the thing you cast Wahlberg in, and that's part of why I think that movie is just like intentionally hilarious. But yeah, this was wrong, and I do blame Burton for like the complete inability to direct him to
Mhm.
bring anything out of his performance, because there's that sequence at the end where he has to like give the inspiring speech to the humans, and I'm like, this sucks. Like, this is awful.
Yeah.
Like, I am not even a little bit inspired by any of what you're saying right now, Mark. And that's like the biggest problem that just permeates the movie is like he's like so pivotal to every scene and every sequence, and like the humans like rallying around this man from the stars, and also Helena Bonham Carter like really wanting to have sex with him,
Uh-huh.
just like, but like there's no charisma there. So like
Yeah.
you think she wants to have sex with him because she's kind of freaky like that, and it has nothing to do with him as like a character.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they made some choices with her character, right?
Ah,
Yeah.
God, oh my
It's
God, Tim,
it's
calm down.
it's funny how like I think this is another great way of showing how great the first movie actually was, because as
Yeah.
we discussed, like Taylor in that movie is kind of a piece of shit. He's a terrible person, and by virtue of that fact is a perfect representative of humanity, because he sucks. Whereas this guy is just brave hero man, and he bravely flies out into space to save his monkey friend, and then bravely tries to help the humans, and then bravely you're just like, I don't, there's no character here.
Well, I think if I think what they were trying to do here is that they were trying to build him as a person who's actually selfish and rash, right? Like he didn't really hop into the spaceship to go save his monkey friend. Like the quote he says as he hops into a spaceship is never send a monkey to do a man's job, right? He was tired of this whole situation in which they were sending out apes to do these missions. He wanted to fly. He wanted to go out there and do the thing. And so he saw an opportunity to get it and he did it. And his rash action caused the crash of this entire ship because they went looking for him and it created this whole world of monkeys. That's the big reveal, is that he created all this. He set this all in motion. Um, but I guess the him choosing to like stay and try to rally the people and help them is supposed to be the resolution of that arc. Is like he was a self-involved asshole that learned how to be selfless. Um, but yeah, it doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I definitely saw the same movie as you, but until you kind of sketched that out, I it didn't really occur to me that that was what they were going for. But yeah, I think that is what they were going for. It just didn't land for me.
It doesn't hit enough. So like the way they constructed the arc was basically like it has a beginning definition of him hopping in and going, and then it has the end beat, but there's no beats throughout the course of the rest of the story that's reinforcing this character and his behavior in that way. And so yeah, it's blink and you miss it.
Yeah. I almost, it's funny. I remembered thinking, you know, about this movie. Well, the highlight of the movie is Tim Roth's
Yes.
performance as the evil
Mhm.
ape.
Yeah. Yeah.
And while he is very fun to watch, it doesn't really like for some reason I remembered him being a more interesting, like tragic, almost Shakespearean character in my memories of teenagerhood. And then you
That's so
watch the
funny.
yeah, what go ahead.
No, I just like I completely agree, and
Yeah.
I don't know, that's not in this movie at all. So go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it's just not. It's just like he's like really aggro and angry all the time, which is kind of fun. Like he's edgy.
Hmm.
um and Ross' performance is like his physical performance of inhabiting the ape persona is great. His voice is it works. He's always like um maybe they're kind of going for like a foil thing where he's like sort of a foil to Wahlberg, where he's also very sort of impetuous and headstrong. But I don't. I'm being generous in saying that. Um,
Yeah. He
but
just seems to want power in the most shallow, boring, uninteresting way. Like, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I distinctly remember the scene with him and his father
mhm,
as something that constructs a like more interesting version of this character where he's like torn between this legacy of his family because they are the descendants of Semos, right? And so he's got this pull of this grand legacy he has to uphold, while also like really being into Helena Bonham Carter's character and her like being entirely uninterested in him and the complicated like Gastonian,
mhm.
which is a phrase now. I've just made it up. Um, like unrequited love of this powerful man who can have any woman he wants but wants this particular one. She's the only one that doesn't want him. um like I remember that being much more complicated and nuanced, and then so the ending scene where he's like hiding under the table afraid because he's stuck in the cage and like all his power means nothing, like felt very profound.
Yeah,
But that's not in this movie actually. Like I guess like the very 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 like surface layer of all this is in the movie, but
Yeah.
but he's just a crazy ape. That's all. That's all he is.
Yeah. I totally no, it's so funny that we have this because I distinctly remembered the scene where he's cowering in the cage as being like, oh, what a richly poetic ending to this movie. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, I get like what you're trying to do, and it's not like, okay, yeah, he's been laid low by the revelation of the truth, but
Hmm.
um maybe it's slightly working against us that we have just watched all the other Apes movies, and so we're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously that's what you do. And it's like, well, maybe if you know, if this is kind of, if you're watching this movie in isolation, then it's a little bit more fresh. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, man, this movie doesn't have anything to say about anything like that. I mean, that's like the thing that is true throughout the five original movies, good or bad. Like even the ones that didn't work as well as others, like they are trying to do something interesting. They are trying to construct this world to make a larger metaphor about humanity and what it means to be a human being that exists on the planet. And this movie's not doing any of that. There's just like there's none of that here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, again, perfunctory is the word of the day. It's like they
Yeah.
throw in the element that we've got the humans and the apes living side by side, and the humans are the slaves, but it's very just pat. And the humans, first of all, like the humans can talk in this movie, which fine. Like
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's a horrible choice, but it's like what base it makes it a very much more straightforward sort of just like, oh, it's racism, it's just
Yeah.
racism,
Yeah.
whereas there was some more interesting like sci-fi subtext to the idea that the humans had literally devolved
Yeah.
in the other show. um
Yeah, this fun idea that like they have literally switched places in all ways, right? That the apes are just the intelligent civilized species and the humans are just the unintelligent, uncommunicative, non-civilized wild animal. Like that was the intent of the original premise, and that's not what the premise of this movie is at all. Especially because I mean, I think, you know, we talked about the good parts of what Burton brings to this, and you talked about Tim Roth's performance. The thing that's really weird to me is the way this movie kind of wants to have its cake and eat it too with the apes sometimes,
mhm.
where it wants them to stand upright, to walk like humans, to talk like humans, to be just a civilized, like this is what, like let's pretend human beings as we know them evolved from a chimpanzee instead of our descendant, whatever. And then they like will flip a switch and go into like, oh, this is just a monkey type
Mhm.
things. Like I mean, especially like there's scenes in this movie where in the battle parts they're lining up and they charge across the land and they just become quadrupedal apes again. But then sometimes sometimes they cut to them and they're just running like humans, and I think that's like that in and of itself is fine, but to me it captures this overall thing where like sometimes they reason and act like humans, and then sometimes it's like, oh, but remember they're apes, and so he's just gonna like weirdly smell her for a long time,
Yeah.
or like just like I don't know, there's like some inventive stuff in that, but then there's some like it strikes me as inconsistent. It's like, are they just monkeys who can talk, or are they like because in the 68 Planet of the Apes, they were literally just human beings that looked like apes,
Yeah.
right? Like that's what they were, and that's what they were supposed to be. That was kind of the shocking revelation of it all, is that they weren't really apes anymore as we know them. They were just humans that looked like monkeys.
Yeah. Yeah, right. The ape society is clearly like extremely flawed and terrible, and actively racist in a really horrible way, which is not really present in the 68 movie. Because in the
Yeah.
68 movie, it's like, well, the humans are literally animals in that movie. The apes
Hmm.
are in the same way that we hunt for sport animals that can't speak and casually put them in cages and dissect them and so forth and do experiments on them. The apes did that to the humans, not because they were like moral monsters, but because it's like, well, that's how we behave. We behave
Yeah.
exactly the same way. So the apes come off a lot worse in this movie, and that's not a complaint necessarily. That's not me saying like therefore movie bad. That's just pointing out like they definitely are going a different direction, and then I don't know that they sort of earn or that they do anything particularly um thematically interesting with that. Where I think you basically said this a second ago, but like what are they saying with all of that? Because
Yeah.
ultimately the original movies, like if there is one through line to them, it's like it's in our nature to destroy ourselves, to quote the T-800 in Terminator 2. And like every movie has something to say about that.
Hmm.
And the apes are used as kind of a foil for humanity in different ways between different movies. Maybe
Yeah.
the first one and the second one aren't quite even portraying the apes in exactly the same way, but they're both saying something interesting and different about humanity. Really, like good sci-fi is actually about humanity, even if it's about apes. And this one is just not really doing that for me anyway. I hate the thought that I'm just lambasting the movie when it's always possible that I just sort of missed something, but I just don't think there was that kind of meat to this script. I don't think this was like a high concept sci-fi script that then unfortunately got dumbed down in the edit. I just think there is no cool like high concept sci-fi backbone. They were just like, I know, Planet of the Apes. I haven't made one of those in a while. Get Tim Burton, make it really visually cool, get some actors who like hamming it up, slap them in there, make it really spectacular, have a big battle scene because it's 2001. You got to have a big battle scene with explosions.
Yeah.
um Bam, that's your movie.
I love the term perfunctory. You've said it several times, but like to your point, even like the directing, and like I just mean like the minute to minute, the shot to shot can't like it's boring. Like it's
Yeah,
just like there's nothing interesting that Burton is doing with the camera in any of this. It's just like the shots are very standard and static. There's like one or two moments where he allows himself to be inventive. But for even like the battle sequence is just like rote boring. Like if I didn't know any better, I would guess that Tim Burton did not want to shoot a battle sequence for this movie.
hmm,
And like you said, they needed one because that's what we did in the early 2000s in these type of movies. We had a big battle sequence. And he's like, fine. And he just did it. And it's just like, there's no care given to like the geography of the sequence of the setting of any of this. None of it makes sense. Like even the moment that like ends the war, which is the new monkey coming down, it's very unclear like why everyone's like how many people died in this fight, Matt? Like I have no idea.
oh, like hundreds of gorillas died
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
blew them away with the giant ship engines.
Uh-huh.
And but then they kind of make it PG after that point.
And I guess like it's too pat of an ending to just be like, oh well, the chimp came down and so everyone stopped fighting. Like there's that part at the end where Michael Clark Duncan, they're burying the dead, and he goes, the graves will be unmarked. No one will be able to tell the difference between human and ape, as it should be, and now will be from now on. And you're
Yeah,
just like, why?
yeah,
What? Like if like if this would be like to complete the metaphor that they're trying to make here, this would be if like southern plantation owners were like visited by one black person that said, hey, slavery is bad, and then they were just like, oh my god, and
yeah,
then just like they all just stopped slavery. Like even the slave trader is just like, huh, I didn't realize I could trade with the slaves. And it's just like, wait, what?
yeah.
What?
Right. Now, time for reconstruction, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very silly. I mean, so the Michael Clark Duncan character, first of all, like that's another like fun performance where he's being this giant gorilla. It's fun, but
Hmm.
toward the end, I was just like, why are you doing or saying any of the things that you're doing and saying? Like he's like, everything I believed is a lie, and I'm like, why do you
Well, I
think
think
that?
he was supposed to be like the hyper religious gorilla, right? Like
Yeah,
he was supposed to be like that. We get this view of the world that they live in, where there are like religious fundamentalists, and then there are the more progressive apes played by Helena Bonham Carter's character, which, by the way, I haven't said any of the names of the characters
Uh-huh.
because I don't remember any of them.
Me neither. Except
Um,
Thade.
Thade, yeah, is the only one. I think Helena Bonham Carter's character's name is Ari, which
Uh-huh.
is really. Are we sure that's the name? That's what IMDb says. I don't remember that at all. But also, Paul Giamatti's character's name is Limbo. Did you know that? I didn't know
No.
that.
No, that's great.
Um, anyway, so yeah, I think Helena Bonham Carter is supposed to represent like the more progressive ape that doesn't buy into all the religious mumbo jumbo. But then I'm unclear of like how much of the society is represented by Michael Clark Duncan. Like, is this a fervently religious society in which the people like Helena Bonham Carter's character are outliers, or are most people like her? And it's just like the warring faction of the group tends to be more fundamentalist. I don't know,
Yeah.
and it kind of the only way we see of Michael Clark Duncan's doing this is like he's praying to Simo several times
Yeah.
right before an action scene starts.
It's just a very funny little like microcosm lesson of screenwriting, because contrast the simplicity of like Zira and Cornelius are sort of bickering over like what they're allowed to do to the human subjects, and
Mhm.
then the clearly more socially powerful Dr. Zaius comes in and like chastises them, and they're clearly like cowed by him. And you
Mhm.
establish the kind of world that this is, and the pecking order and the general ethos of the world in like 5 minutes. And then this movie has like this incredibly tedious politics dinner scene with like 9 characters with all this back and forth. I'm like, is this the Star Wars prequels? Like what? And none of these characters show up again beyond like sort of comic relief moments here and there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, and there's all this subtext. Like maybe this is just because by this point I had turned on the movie, and thus I'm being very ungenerous to it, which, my bad if so. But I feel like there was all this implied subtext between Michael Clark Duncan's character and the gorilla who was with Helena Bonham Carter. And I was like, what
Where did
is,
that come from?
yeah, like what is this? There's some pre-existing relationship here, clearly.
Yeah.
Well, what am I supposed to know about this? Is this supposed to be, I literally am like, is this a deleted scene where
Yeah.
something was told to us? Um, I thought I just missed it. I was like, oh, okay.
No, I'm with you on this. Like, I don't know what this is because yeah, it's very clear that the one that's with Helena Bonham Carter is like their guard, I guess. So like
Mhm.
he seems older. He's an older gorilla, so it's almost as like there's this supposed to be this like mentor mentee relationship, because they both also seem pretty religious. Like
Mhm.
they seem like they're both kind of fundamentalists in that regard, and so like maybe he was his commanding officer at one point and then retired from the military, like took this job with this very very progressive chimpanzee, and that's he, and then Michael Clark Duncan's character feels a sense of betrayal there. But yeah, that's not, I don't know, like there's that this whole kind of final face off between the two of them that is just, I guess they were like, well, we got two gorillas so they should fight each other, and then yeah, you just kind of feel nothing there
And then
because
Michael Clark then kills the other one, and buries
yeah.
him. And I guess you're right. I mean, I'm not against things being subtextual. Like it's not. I just feel like it was half-assed.
Yeah.
Actually, like there's a difference between subtextual and you didn't quite sell what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
Um,
I just also think like the subtlety and nuance of the original movie is gone in every way. Like, I mean, to your point, Helena Bonham Carter's character is created in this movie as basically like the perfect chimpanzee, right? Like
mhm,
she's an abolitionist. She thinks this whole thing is disgusting. Like the counterpart character of her, Zira, in the originals, as you said, was someone who was like regularly performing operations on humans,
uh-huh,
like because she didn't see them as human,
uh-huh,
and so she had no qualms of it, and like the movie doesn't seem to care that like that could damage you, the viewer's perception of her, is like, oh, look how she's treating us,
mhm,
like maybe we're not gonna like her, but it like trusts that that's not gonna happen.
mhm,
This movie seems like terrified of you forgetting who the good guys and bad guys are at all times. So it has to make her into this. First of all, out of all the apes, she is the one that acts like the most human.
Mhm.
And out of all the apes, the bad ape is the one that acts the most ape, which is just like very, very boring and
Mhm.
unsubtle in any way. Like, and her performance in this movie, Matt, I don't like. Do we blame Tim Burton for this? Like, it's ridiculous. Like that just, and I'm not even talking about like her presence as an actor, which I think she has a very good presence as an actor. Just her line reads sometimes. It's like, was this because the prosthetic on your face was difficult to talk through, or could you just not say these lines well at all?
Yeah, I think the script is just really awful, and so it's unclear how she could have done a better job. I don't know. Yeah, I it's funny she didn't. Sh she's just boring compared to everyone else who at least has the good grace to be over the top and thus,
Mhm.
you know, noticeable.
I think here's my theory on this is Helena Bonham Carter has very good instincts, is a very good actress, is very good at being like kind of fascinatingly creepy at times,
Mhm.
but she needs a director that like knows when to tell her the appropriate scene to do those things in and isn't. And the one scene that kept jumping out to me was when they were standing by like the big scarecrow that's meant to scare people off from the Forbidden Lands, and like they're basically outlining like the religion of the society, like the foundational beliefs of the society. And she's giving her lines while she's like looking through a hole in the rag that is like the scarecrow meant to scare people away. And it's very Helena Bonham Carter to do that. Like I almost am firmly in the belief that that was just something that she in the moment felt like was the instinctual thing she was going to do. But I think it's wrong for the scene. It's the wrong, she's being kind of cavalier and indifferent in a scene where they have just abandoned their hometown, are considering going into the Forbidden Land for the first time, and also is she's making an argument that the religion of their society is wrong and silly. And like the way she, I don't know, it's so weird to me the way she does that performance. It just like, if you're listening to this at home and you haven't seen the movie in the while, go watch that scene again and just be like, what are you doing, Helena? Like, what is this? And I just think a better director would be like, I really love that. Can we put that somewhere else? Like, this is
Mhm.
not the way this character would be behaving right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think it's just probably the approach to all of the ape performances is like they got to be big, they got to be
Hmm.
over the top to make it fun. Like so much of what's fun about Tim Roth's performance is just like the willingness to go to 11, and like there's whole sequences where it's almost like an effect sequence where he's just jumping around being
Hmm.
mad, um which I was going to say this at some point, but like this is one of the things that's kind of a shame is I thought the scenes where he would just jump around when I was a kid, I thought those were cool. I was like, sweet. That's cool, right? And now I think it's literally just because we're spoiled on 20 years of amazing special effects and Marvel and etc. That just looks terrible to me now. And like it's obvious where we're just like cutting and having like, okay, so here like the actor is basically doing hand over hand monkey bars, and then we like cut and we make it seem like he jumped this amazing distance, but it's very obvious to my eye now. And I don't know to hold that against the movie necessarily, because again, it did work on me when I was young. It's just something where when I was watching it this time, I was like, oh wow, this is a great example of special effects not holding up. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I do like that they've, at least as compared to the earlier films, that they made the apes seem like closer to the strength they would actually have in the fights they have with the humans, right? Like
mhm.
they're very strong. I think the jumping thing in particular was weird to me because I don't know, don't quote me on this. I don't think chimpanzees can jump that high. I think they can probably jump like relatively higher than we can. And I don't mean like they can jump like 6 feet in the air or anything. Like
Uh-huh.
I think like based on their height and stature, they could jump higher than we could if we were of similar height, right?
Uh-huh.
But I like they're not like chimps are not like leaping into the air, leaping like 20 feet into the air type it. I
Yeah.
mean, no animal is a leaping 20 feet into the air animal, but like not known like for their jumping in particular.
Yeah. I think it's the classic, like, whatever, monkeys like to jump,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
like monkeys. It's like, okay, but they're chimpanzees are a very particular kind of animal. They can't do that. I
yeah.
agree.
Which, by the way, the joke we made at the intro of the, the episode was that apes don't like water
Uh-huh.
because they can't swim in water; they drown. And that's like this big thing, and it's used several times throughout the movie, but it's ridiculous. Like,
Uh,
I really think someone like did a cursory like amount of ape research and found out there was this misnomer for a very long time that like chimpanzees could not swim,
uh-huh.
and we know that to be false now. We've seen chimpanzees in the wild swim. Gorillas do not swim,
Uh-huh.
but gorillas like structurally are so differently built from
Yeah.
us, which to your point, I think you brought this up on an earlier episode, but like in this movie the gorillas are the only ones that are just completely bipedal and just stand up straight and like, which is hilarious because it's literally the exact opposite.
Yeah.
um I think like 90% of that decision, I think, is just when you cast Michael Clark Duncan as a gorilla, like you're just gonna have him stand fully upright
Yeah.
because first of all, he couldn't do it any other way, and second of all, because it makes him very powerful and imposing, which is what you want.
Yeah, there's I agree. It's actually kind of cool when it's basically just him standing next to Helena Bonham Carter, and it almost comes off as an effects shot because of how gigantic he is. I love that. I was going to mention this earlier when we were complaining about the directing, but I just wanted to get this in at some point because there's like a sequence of like 3 shots that I just thought were so funny because they were awful, and it's like one of the scenes when they like go to the gorilla camp and they're stealing the horses, and Mark Wahlberg is like riding the horse, and it's just so lazy and crappy because it shows like the shot of Mark Wahlberg riding a horse, and then like shot of one of the gorillas, like totally separate shots. So the nothing is ever in the same frame, right? Totally
Mhm.
separate shot of a gorilla like holding like some kind of thing, and then he throws it, and then shot of like a stationary horse's leg on the planted on the ground with like the thing wrapped around it already. You don't even see it like hit; it's just wrapped around it. And
Yeah.
then shot of Mark Wahlberg sort of like lunging, but with no horse in the frame. There's no
Mhm.
horse that he's lunging off of. And then shot of Mark Wahlberg landing on the ground in a a very, very safe looking fall, as if I just like collapse forward onto the ground from a standing position. And what's supposed to be communicated here is they threw some kind of bola at the horse's leg and it tripped the horse, and then Mark Wahlberg went flying. But like, it's just so lazy,
Yeah.
right? Like I was like, this is terrible,
Yeah.
and that's kind of indicative of the whole directing philosophy behind a lot of the action. Is like, what's the laziest, shittiest way to do this? Because I don't have time. Uh, yeah, a remarkable sequence of shots.
It's so funny because I didn't know where you're going with this until you mentioned the horse, and then I'm immediately like, yeah, that whole sequence is terrible. It has I mean, even outside of that particular sequence of shots, which is bad, like the whole charging through the camp sequence is some of the most like slow, like untense filmmaking I've ever seen.
Uh-huh.
It's like Mark Wahlberg's just kind of galloping around, setting tents on fire, and like nobody's touching him. And then we have these giant imposing gorillas, and he'll like ride by on a horse and like stick his foot out, and it just like launches a gorilla backwards to the point like completely unbelievable, like,
Uh-huh.
and like the whole like there it's so airless, that whole sequence. It's
Yeah.
just like there's no way these guys wouldn't immediately be caught, like there's just no way. And
Uh-huh.
it doesn't work at all, and that's how all the action sequences in this I guess technically action film are to me. Like none of them work, none of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, the Planet of the Apes has never been an action franchise. There's nothing particularly compelling about it. The idea of
Hmm.
putting a big CGI battle at the end of a Planet of the Apes movie is stupid. The second they're okay, let me actually walk back some of that partially. There have been battles in previous Planet of the Apes movies. There was the sort of uh, uh, there was combat at the end of the second movie.
Yeah.
And there was combat in the one where actually, let me walk back. That there's combat in most of the movies, okay, but it's usually like it's better when it's like constrained to like the apes are hunting a man
Yeah.
and the man is trying to escape, or vice versa, like the men are hunting an ape who is trying to escape. When it's a big clash of powers, it's always boring and crappy, and the same is true here. I don't know why we wanted to do this.
Yeah, I
It-
mean, we liked Battle for the Planet of the Apes, but we did not like the battle in Battle for the Planet of the
yeah,
Apes. Like that was not a strong point of that film. And yeah,
exactly.
30 years later, they've done nothing to improve that formula at all. It
Yeah.
was not a good battle. It was just as clunky. And like, I think maybe this is just like the general problem of like if apes and humans are in hand to hand fights, the humans lose.
Uh-huh.
Like even in the scenario where like they blow up um like a huge amount of the gorillas and they blow them all up and then they charge them as like the ones that didn't die outright are slowly getting up, they charge them. Like the first thing that popped in my head as I watched that, I was like, oh, you're still gonna lose.
Yeah.
Because like if one gorilla gets up and you charge it with a stick, it's just going to kill you.
Uh-huh.
Like it's like and I mean, I think we gave the earlier movies a lot of extension of disbelief in this, right? Like obviously they're just people in masks, like obviously like none of this really works, but I feel like this movie tried to be a little bit more realistic with it and it hurts it even more.
Mhm.
Because it's just like, especially when you cast Michael Clark Duncan, it's just like, no, like he's just going to rip your arms off, like
Yeah.
you're just going to die. And we wanted to lean into the apes are apes thing in this movie a lot more, and that hurt these hand-to-hand sequences even more.
Yeah, you're right. I almost feel like this is just not even worth saying, but the scenes where Mark Wahlberg is fighting uh uh Thad, I forgot his name after saying that it was the only memorable name, whatever it was.
I can't
Um
remember it. I
Tim
think
Roth.
Tim
Like
Roth, yes.
it's just you're just sort of like perplexed because what
Mhm.
Tim Roth is able to like lightly grip him and then just like flip him into the air, and Mark Wahlberg will soar 12 feet in the air and smash against the wall and fall to the
Yeah.
ground. And then Tim Roth will like run over to him, and instead of like throttling him or snapping his neck or ripping his arms off or punching him in the face until he's dead, he'll do the like wild like throwing his hands up in the air and then beating them sort of aimlessly against Mark Wahlberg's back while Mark Wahlberg cowers in a pile, and it's like I could believe that he's just so angry that he's not fighting intelligently,
Mhm.
but it happens so many times, like over and over, that you're like Mark Wahlberg has never even like landed a blow in this fight,
Yeah.
and at a certain point, you're just like, this is just not a fight. Actually, this is just nothing, and then you're
Yeah.
bored. Yeah.
I mean, the most effective sequences are the ones with the guns, for obvious reasons, right?
Mhm.
Like when Wahlberg gets the gun, and then when Thad
I literally forgot already.
doesn't matter. When
Yeah.
Tim Roth gets the gun, I like that part a lot. I like when Tim Roth gets the gun. Actually, to give this movie credit, when Tim Roth gets the gun and we kind of see his character slowly figure out the correct way to hold it. Like when he first grabs it, he's holding it totally wrong, and then you see him like piece together how to hold it correctly. I thought that was really effective. Like that was some really effective work there. Like just the thread of it kind of starts to build as you realize he's figured out how to use it.
Yeah.
But then Mark Wahlberg just like presses a button
Uh-huh.
on a 3,000-year-old ship, and it makes this perfect force
Yeah.
field come down that you just
Yeah.
can't blow up at all.
Yeah. It's fine. Whatever. Thade. Thade.
Thade. There we go.
Is
Like
it time to talk?
Slade.
Yeah, like Slade. Is it time to talk about the ending now?
Sure, let's do it. Let's do it. So, for those of you that have possibly forgotten, the ending of the movie is Mark Wahlberg says goodbye to the monkey that loves him and the hot chick that loves him, and gets on back on the space pod, flies back into space, goes, I guess, through the time portal. He's assuming back to the past. Um, then goes back to Earth, lands on Earth, crash lands in Washington D.C., and finds, oh no, it is Washington, D.C., but it's monkey Washington, D.C., and the Lincoln Monument is not a dedication to Abraham Lincoln anymore. It's a dedication to Tim Roth's Thad,
Uh-huh.
Thade. Um, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so couple things.
Yeah.
As a stinger, a fun stinger on the end of the movie, I think this is fine, and I like it. The part of it that I had forgotten was that the monument was not just, oh, it's Abraham Lincoln, but he's an ape, ha ha ha. The part that I had forgotten is that it's Thade.
It's very funny how similar you and I are in some ways, because I also remembered, I literally misremembered it, because I was like, yeah, it's like a campy, stupid ending,
Yeah,
but whatever. Uh, Monkey Abraham Lincoln, that's wacky. That like that would never happen, because
yeah.
but the fact that it stayed, you're like, wait. So is this the future? Is this another? Is this more into the future? Or like, what are we meant to, so it's exactly the worst thing, where you walk out of the theater being like, so what the hell was that? Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
totally forgot the movie you just watched, because you're trying to figure out this stupid thing, which, if it had just been a stupid campy joke, that would be fine. I honestly think that I would be fine with it if it were just Monkey Abraham Lincoln, because
Yeah.
isn't that sort of a reference to the book, to the
Yes.
novel? Yeah, I
Yes.
forget the details there.
The essential thing that we talked about this in the first episode, but as a refresher, the framing device of the book is it's two like astronauts that hear the story that's being relayed to them of a human that found himself on a monkey planet, and then like the reveal at the end of the book is that the two people talking about this story the entire time were apes.
Hmm.
And they just live in a world in which it like that's the big reveal. So it's just our world, but apes essentially. So that's what they're trying to do here a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right that it just makes you ask questions that are stupid to ask, because like the reveal in the first movie is that we were on Earth all along. That's the surprise reveal, is that it was Earth the whole time.
Yeah.
And what that means about, and like, that reveal is fun because it changes what you understand, but it also ties thematically to what the whole fucking movie is about, which is about humanity and humanity's propensity for destruction, and using the apes as a metaphor or a comparison point for that. It being Earth in the end cements the worst possible thought that Charlton Heston's character could possibly have about humans. He was right the whole time. He was right about exactly where we were going. He was traveling the stars to try to find a place in which we could possibly be good, and he couldn't find it. It didn't exist. We blew it up. We did it. God damn it.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't mean anything. There's nothing, and part of the reason is because the movie doesn't mean anything. But if they're trying to do something that's like a shocking surprise reveal, even if the reveal is supposed to be that I guess we were on Earth all along, which doesn't make sense within the context of the movie because it was a barren, uninhabited world, yada, yada, yada. It's meaningless. It's just meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Like it would be one thing if the whole movie had landed as pure camp and it was just a sort of comedy. And then you end with that scene and it's like, yeah, sure, whatever, I don't care. But no, the movie was very self-serious to the point of being tedious at times, with the exception, I guess, of Paul Giamatti's character, who was basically the comic relief consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ends with that, so you're just like, okay, so I guess I wasn't supposed to take this seriously. I don't know. I just wanted to mention the ending because it's so weird.
Well, and again, I think you're totally right that if it had just been Monkey Abraham Lincoln, we'd be having a totally different conversation right now. The fact that it's Thade makes your brain go, huh? Yeah. Like, I mean, honestly, this is my question, Matt. You've seen this movie multiple times now. You've had time to sit down and think about this movie. What does that mean? Were we on Earth all along? Is this the future, not of Earth, but of this planet? Did Thade actually eventually take control back of this planet again?
What? Yeah. So to the extent that I thought seriously about this, which was mostly when I was a teenager. Uh, like what must have happened is that Thade like retook control of the society. Maybe found another one of the spacecraft. Oh, was there a second spacecraft? I think there might have been a second spacecraft.
There was Wahlberg's pod
Yeah,
crashed into the water, and then the pod he left in was the monkey's pod.
yeah. And then
What was the
Thade,
monkey named, by the way?
I don't remember. It wasn't Cemos, was it?
No, it wasn't Cemos.
That was the other one.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, to finish my thought, he must have taken the other ship, literally gone to Earth through the time portal in the past, taken over the world, and replaced the human population with monkeys, and then like carried out all of history from whatever point he landed to the present in a similar way. That's the part I complain about the least, because that sort of stupid thing is like a recurring motif in the way these movies deal with time travel. Yeah, you're just which almost okay. So here's the horrible truth is that was set up because doesn't he intentionally hide the fact that he's found one of the ships by killing his two? So that was one thing I noticed on this viewing is I was like, wait a minute, what's this? What's the consequence of this? When does it matter that he has hidden the existence of the ship? And I think it's literally for that stinger ending to make sense.
Sure, that's absurd. That's. I mean, I think this is fitting for the series then, because it's almost as absurd as Cornelius and Zira sneaking onto a spaceship in between movies in order to avoid getting blown up by the planet. Yeah, I mean, sure, whatever.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like earlier in the conversation, like this isn't just a remake of Planet of the Apes. This is kind of a remake slash pastiche of several of the first movies, where we have elements for Battle for the Planet of the Apes, or whichever one was the second one. I'm sorry, I already forgot all the names.
Beneath
the Planet of the Apes, except without the psychics, but we have the battle element of it at least. And then we have so yeah, sure, fine. Instead of Cornelius and Zira going back in time, it's Thade. And then yeah, great. It doesn't make sense, but I think that's what they were trying to do, honestly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe I like it better now with that. Sure.
No, it's very funny because I literally never realized. I never thought to ask. Like he's hiding. He kills his two men to hide the existence of the ship, and then that just never comes up again.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of figured it was like, I mean, so there's some stuff with Thade and his father where his dad like has this secret gun hidden inside this very elaborate urn that goes completely unexplained. You're so right that the title sequence works very well, because it's like shows this very elaborate, beautiful urn, and you're kind of waiting for how this is going to tie into the story, and it's just like, oh, we just put a gun in it, and, and that's what we do. So smash it, and you'll see that there's a gun in there. And so like I think this is where the movie is trying to be clever with that part where it's like, it's trying to say something about humanity here, trying like, this is the inevitability of humans. They're clever and they create these weapons to destroy and yada 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 yada. Although it seems like the apes have created a bunch of weapons too. They're just not as advanced as we are. So like whatever. But I mean, that's kind of what I thought the hiding of the ship was, is that like through his father he was like aware of some of the truth of their origin, and similar to how Zaius does in the first movie, he is like trying to keep the populace unaware of that truth. But I don't think that's actually it based on what the movie does, but that's what I thought in the moment when he kills those two gorillas that found the ship.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right, and that is how it plays in the moment. But then I think in retrospect, now I'm putting together that like, well, there is a second ship, and that's and he knows where it is. So I don't know.
Just to be clear though, to make this scenario work, Thade has to be let out of the ruins of the big ship, and like, so he says, I'll get you,"
Uh-huh.
and then runs away,
Uh-huh.
finds a spaceship underwater,
Uh-huh.
and as we know, Matt, apes don't swim; they drown. Finds a
Uh-huh.
spaceship underwater. Which I'm sorry, this is a complete tangent. But when Mark Wahlberg finds the two dead apes under there and comes out of the water and says to Helena Bonham Carter, "I thought you guys said you didn't swim. There are two apes down there." And I'm like, "Well, Mark, they're dead."
uh,
So she was right. So
uh,
anyway, he dives underwater, finds a way to lift the spaceship out from under the water, repair it, and then launch a solo mission through the time rift, fly back to Earth in, I guess, 2029, and then do the events of the next
yeah,
Planet of the Apes movies from that on. Like that's what we're saying
that's
has
what
to
we're
happen
saying.
here. Okay.
100%. That's what happened.
Okay.
Um, just maybe you said this and I spaced, but his father is Charlton Heston, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I don't think I put that together.
yeah,
Charlton Heston was alive in 2001.
yeah. Apparently, apparently the character's name is Zaius, by the way, which I didn't pick up on.
I didn't pick up on that either.
But yeah,
But he's not a orangutan.
nope, he's just a chimp. But it's definitely him. I noticed from his voice, and then I just verified it. And apparently, Linda Harrison was had a brief cameo as one of the humans.
Oh, interesting.
It's just,
of course, we would not recognize her because I've only ever seen that woman dressed up like a monkey.
right.
By the way, I think we should say, I do think, as clunky as some of the special effects are, the fully practical ape makeup in this movie, I thought was pretty good overall.
Yeah.
Like, obviously a vast improvement over the earlier ones. And then, of course, we'll see in the later films, they just make them CG characters. But I don't know. I thought this was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. There are very few moments that were anything other than fully convincing.
Yeah.
Usually if I did notice a moment that I kind of thought was a little wobbly, it was like during one of the combat scenes where the camera's kind of at a distance anyway. And it didn't bother me. No, I thought it was really good. I like the, so like technically it's very solid, and then aesthetically it's very compelling. Like the way they go about making it like that's a cool interpretation of an anthropomorphic chimp face or orangutan face. I really I like Paul Giamatti's particular makeup in his character, because he's just so like frumpy and ugly and schlubby. And he invests that mask and that prosthetic with a lot of character, with his own facial expressions underneath it. It really, he's got that like sideways crooked grin and squinty eyes. He really makes good use of it. He's really able to successfully act through all that stuff.
I think Paul Giamatti's arc in the movie is like my favorite arc in the movie, of going from just the asshole slave trader to like, I mean, we talked about how he just suddenly decides he's not going to be a slave trader anymore, but he does, to be fair, go through like, I love the moments where he comes to that realization that, hey, they just attacked me like I was one of you. Like, he sees himself as superior and apart from humans, and like being treated, and he has this kind of privileged position in society by being like by being a slave trader, by providing these slaves for everyone, and then like getting torn down and like seeing how they treat him as if he's just as bad as the slaves that he trades in, I think is this eye-opening experience for him. And Giamatti, like, he's a comic relief, you're absolutely right, but Giamatti puts his essential Paul Giamatti-ness in this role.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't find the exact quote right now, but there's this wonderful quote where he was obsessed. Paul Giamatti was obsessed with the Planet of the Apes movies as a kid, and when he had the opportunity, his agents were like, his talent agency was like, you're gonna want to play a human, right? Because we gotta show your face. Like, it'll be better for your career if we show your face. And he's like, I want to play a monkey. If you don't tell them I want to play a monkey, I'm going to kill all of you.
I, by the way, speaking of monkey, like the obsession with Mark Wahlberg of calling them monkeys, and then the created like tension with the one guy with he's like insulted that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Actually, let's talk about this because they break their own movie here, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So he calls them monkeys, and the man gets really mad at him, and he jumps 30 feet into the air and lands on him, which doesn't kill him. Um,
Yep.
and then what he says to him is like apes, monkeys are lower on the evolutionary ladder, just above humans. And you're like, wait a minute. If all the life on this planet came from the spaceship that crashed, there's no monkeys in your society at all.
Uh-huh.
There's just chimpanzees, orangutans, and gorillas, and then humans.
Uh-huh.
Because that's it. You're not making any sense, movie.
Yeah.
I've caught you.
How does he even know what the evolutionary ladder is?
Yeah, and then there's a later part where Mark Wahlberg literally says, "Time to teach evolution to monkeys." It's like, well, which is it, y'all?
Yeah. Also, what do they eat?
I
guess they're vegetarians.
They eat humans.
Oh, what do the humans eat? I mean, I guess there must be plants. There's clearly jungles. I'm just.
Well, I mean, the question is, Matt, is this Earth? Because that changes everything.
Like, I'm pretty sure that we distinctly see that it's like a planet with like 3 moons.
Yeah.
So
no,
I'm just like, it's definitely we're definitely not doing that unless somebody really screwed up.
Yeah. No, you're right. Did you know that moons can have moons?
I mean, I knew that in principle it was possible. I don't know if we've ever found one, have we?
I don't
know.
idea. Well, they have a term for it. Do you know what a moon on a moon is called?
I don't.
It's called a moon.
Oh, okay. It's cool.
I'm not even kidding. Kidding.
I think I might have found.
Hank Green taught me this.
That's great. I think I might have found one of those in Outer Wilds.
Okay, no, you can't just open up that and start talking about Outer Wilds here at the end of this episode.
No,
that's a whole nother conversation.
We're not going to do that. That's going to be a whole nother podcast, probably.
Yeah, you're going to make me replay it.
Yeah.
All right. What else do you want? So you mentioned Danny Elfman at the beginning, which like I'm watching the opening credits for this movie and I'm like thinking to myself, why does this sound so much like Spider-Man? And then Danny Elfman's name appears on the movie and I'm like, yeah, there we go. It is kind of wild to me. Just like every time you hear an Elfman score, like there's so many like sense memories pinging off of the score. It's like this. Oh yeah, that sounds a little bit like Men in Black. That sounds a little bit like Edward Scissorhands. That's like, and it's just like it just is wild to me, like how dominant my childhood was by Danny Elfman music without me being conscious of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he's got a bunch of characteristic little stylistic ticks, which I like most of them, if not all.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I thought the only shortcoming of the music in this movie is that it is not enough to save the movie.
Yeah, I agree.
There's always something sad when you take an incredibly talented composer and you have them score a movie that is just dramatically non-functional. So they're doing their best to inject some emotion into the scene, but there just is none and cannot be. And then it just feels like, oh, you know, he tried, but there was no way. So,
do you think that Tim Burton wanted Mark Wahlberg and Helena Bonham Carter to bang in this movie?
I think so. I think that was a joke. I think that was a joke that he kept making in the script room. He kept throwing that out there. What if?
It's really funny because in the end of the first movie, Charlton Heston and Zira kiss, right? That is in the movie. That is a thing that happens in the movie.
Yeah.
But it always struck me more as like this is 1968 and this is just the way men say thank you to women.
Yeah. Right.
And in this movie, like it's like someone watched that and it was like, ooh, there's some sexual tension here.
Yeah.
And so they just like leaned so heavily into it for the entire movie that there's sexual tension between Mark Wahlberg and this chimpanzee.
Yeah.
And then so the kiss at the end means so much more. And apparently was incredibly offensive because they cut the kiss out of the film showing in India. They did not show the kiss happen in
Uh,
India.
oh my god.
So it's so weird. It's so weird, man.
Yeah, well, the way, like, again, the one with Zira in the first movie is it's funny because it's like neither of them really wants to kiss. It's almost just like he's playing a joke on her,
Mhm.
like practically. And then in this one, there's like they kiss, and she kind of like turns her face into his to make sure there's just like full lip on lip contact, and kind of turns her face, like even as he's pulling away, it's like her mouth is seeking his, is like some
Yeah.
sexually charged moment, and you're just like,
Yeah.
whoa,
I
whoa.
kept waiting for them. I really thought they were gonna do this. I kept waiting for the cut to not Amber Heard and like seeing her emotional reaction to him
Uh-huh.
going to town on this monkey. They didn't
Uh-huh.
do that. I wish they had done that.
It would have
Yeah, I
been,
mean,
yeah, it would have been better.
to to be slightly serious for a second here, like I think the reason why the kiss is in the first movie is partially, at least, that like one of the kind of through lines of their interactions is Zira telling him consistently how freaking ugly he is. And
Yeah,
that's like one of the funny jokes of this thing is like they look at human beings as just hideous. And so like kissing at the end is kind of a symbol of their understanding of each other and respect from each other changing fundamentally,
yeah,
that they're going to have that kind of physical contact, but it doesn't mean they want to bang each other.
yeah,
It's just like that's so ridiculous.
yeah. Right. It's like, uh, you know, it's exactly the way that we think of apes as being ugly, and very, very far from something that we would ever feel those sorts of feelings towards. But then if there were an ape who were your really good friend, then you could imagine like giving him a little peck on the cheek out of
Hmm.
affection, right? That's
Hmm.
exactly what it is. Um, just like, I mean, we kiss dogs, and dogs are objectively, you know, more monstrous than chimps. Um,
Well, wait, like
if
in
you
behavior?
if you
No.
have if you have animals on a gradient of like how much they look like humans, dogs are further from humans than apes.
Yes. Yes.
That's all I mean by that. Dogs are beautiful, obviously, but they're beautiful in the way that like an elephant is beautiful, where it's like a
Hmm.
totally different weird thing. Um,
By the way, there's a documentary on Max right now called Chimp Crazy,
uh huh.
and it basically like goes through like the entire history of like human beings and domesticated quote unquote chimpanzees, including the part where that chimp eats that woman's face off.
Uh
Like
huh.
that really actually happened. Um, Fucking wild documentary to watch, especially in between me watching all these movies.
Yeah, I don't think I have the stomach for that. Otherwise, I would suggest we cover it. But I don't. I don't know. Yeah, chimps are terrifying.
Yeah.
Chimps are. I've been like irrationally afraid of chimps ever since I heard about this story. Probably the one you're referring to, but also there have been other stories where chimps, get out of their enclosures and just go on a horribly violent bender.
Look, they're wild animals, man. I mean, I think it's really interesting because I had this thought as I was watching this movie, like when Thade like chucks the chimp across the room and it hits the wall and then like crawls into its cage in pain. There's this moment where the the kind, compassionate human in you is like, oh, the poor little baby, right?
Uh-huh.
Like we see these things, like, and that is the depiction of chimpanzees in popular culture is like almost the domesticated, like performing chimp. That's like, oh,
Yeah,
this poor, oh, look at the little, oh, it's like us, it's like a little baby version of us, and no,
yeah.
no, 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 no. The what was it? The Jordan Peele movie that worked this into it
Um,
so perfectly.
nope.
Nope. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. I mean, I think part of that is that was almost certainly like a juvenile chimp, which is the only
Hmm.
kind of chimp you're ever going to see in a movie, because
Yeah, true.
much like with humans, like a 9-year-old human is almost a different animal from a 35-year-old human, like in
Yeah.
terms of its capabilities, in terms of its disposition, and what you can get away with in terms of how you're treating it. Like an adult chimp is like 150 pounds, and they're like many times stronger than us. And also, I mean, the thing that's scary about chimps, I know it's funny, we always find a way to talk about this. The thing that's messed up about them is like, I would literally be less scared if I saw an escaped lion at the zoo, because the lion could potentially just be like, I don't want to get near that human because I see them as potentially a threat. Whereas a chimp would
Mhm.
be like, I'm going to go bite that human's fingers and face off on purpose immediately, and then find another human to do that to.
Uh-huh.
Because that's what they do. They don't even have the good grace to kill you often. Yeah, they're like, that's like the weird uncanny valley thing about it is like, because they're close to us,
Mhm.
they're like more evil.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. We are do you like I feel like the 90s were like a high point in let's make family movies with apes in them, right?
Uh-huh.
Like I'm thinking of Dunstan checks in. That's an orangutan, not a chimpanzee, but I just feel like there were a lot of movies like that where it's like the joke of the movie was there's also an ape
Uh-huh.
and aren't they funny? Which
Yeah.
has given us all a very, very broken understanding of these animals for sure.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny, I still have a very positive disposition toward orangutans, although I'm
Hmm.
sure they're, you know, also dangerous, right? They're also extremely strong.
Yeah.
Um,
I really like gorillas. I mean, not to the point where I would be like, let's hang out with the gorilla. Obviously not, but like I watched that movie Gorillas in the Mist with Sigourney Weaver in it when I was in middle school
uh-huh.
because like I really liked aliens. I was like, I like Sigourney Weaver. Let's all watch all Sigourney Weaver things. And she made the movie where she's playing Diane Fossey, the um uh I don't know, gorilla biologist, I guess is the phrase to call her. I don't know if you know the story of Diane Fossey. It's really sad.
Not really.
She's I mean, she was one of the people that really helped unlock like gorilla behavior because she actually managed to like input herself into a group of gorillas in the wild. She's kind of hung out around them long enough to that where they got used to her. And she was murdered by poachers because she was
Mm.
like working very, very diligently against the poaching of gorillas in I forget which African country it is now, but um, like a lot of what we understand about gorillas was unlocked by her studying their behavior in the wild, and it's a very, very sad story. Anyway, the point is I've always had this like very, very interesting fascination with gorillas because that movie imprinted on me at a young age. But these are these are definitely animals, and and should not be hanging out with humans.
Yeah. Apparently, just as a way of rounding out this tangent, I guess, like they keep finding more and more evidence of I think both chimps and orangutans like doing tool use in the wild, where it'll be like, and probably a lot of this was known, but I think it's just like more examples of it where, for example, orangutans using sticks to fish, or to like try to get termites out of a hole or whatever,
Hmm.
or ants or whatever it is. Um, not not like Stone Age human sophistication, but definitely more than almost any other animal. Um, I don't know.
That's pretty cool.
This is just a whole thing that I think is fascinating, is how there's like this weird smattering of animals that seem like weirdly intelligent, like
Yeah,
corvids and apes and octopi.
yeah. I love what you said about how it's like they're smart enough to like be monstrous,
Uh-huh.
but like not smart enough to not be monstrous.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying we incredibly intelligent human beings are not monstrous. We certainly have the capability of that. But yeah, it's interesting that like I love this. I love that idea that because they're so close to us, they're just kind of awful at times. That's really, really interesting.
Right. Because I know what they'll do is they'll go on raiding parties against other bands of chimps, and very often the goal will be to like maim, not necessarily to kill, which I don't know that other animals do that. And that's a very sort of calculating, intelligent behavior.
Yeah, gosh.
Um, yeah.
Um, Okay, to attempt to bring this back to the movie we're talking about, I actually think one weakness of this, and you're going to be impressed how I bring this back to an actual salient point. Just
Okay.
hold on.
Okay.
Um, the moment in the movie where basically like the origin of this whole situation is the big ship crash lands. They have these genetically engineered chimpanzees because it was the early 2000s, and when we needed an excuse for something to happen, we just said genetic engineering.
Mhm.
Um, these genetically engineered chimps became helpful and useful in helping kind of build their survival camp as they were trying to figure out how they were going to survive. And then, of course, the chimps eventually rebelled and took over. And the movie treats that as like objectively a bad thing, right? Like the point of view of the movie is that there was this one ape, Simos, who is the ancestor of Thade, and this family line is just evil, actually. And he took over, killed everyone, and enslaved humanity. And
Uh-huh.
it's just like that's objectively in the mind of the movie bad. This is the thing that makes Michael Clark Duncan go, oh my god, everything I've known is a lie. Which, by the way, like very easy to convince this guy, where
Yeah.
you just like tell him that's what happened and he's like, oh, I'm gonna change my whole belief system now. Okay.
Right.
um but I think it would have been so much more interesting if we actually wanted to like inspect and examine that, because that is something that these movies will do, right? Like there was the setup there that the humanity crash lands on this place. They have these monkeys that haven't done anything to anyone. They were genetically tampered with, engineered to be sacrificial lambs, to be canaries in coal mines.
Mhm.
And then they crash land on this planet, and the first thing they do is basically turn them into slave workers, slave labor for them. It's like, do this, we need you to do this, and you're very smart, so you can learn quickly. And then the apes eventually got tired of that and said, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And so they took over. That is what this movie does,
Yeah.
and that is kind of what that sequence gestures towards. But again, with everything in this movie, it's just so black and white. It's like, no, that was objectively bad. It was objectively evil. Like this one ape, this that everyone's worshiping was a bad guy, actually. And if it wasn't for him, we would be living in harmony still.
Yeah.
And that's not Planet of the Apes to me.
Yeah. I mean, what you just described maps very nicely onto Caesar.
Yeah.
Caesar's rebellion was originally violent. He kind of tried to rein it in with mixed success. And depending on our opinions about time travel, was unsuccessful, and the ape society eventually subjugated the humans. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that. Yeah, just totally agree that there's not a lot of nuance. There's not a lot of. It seems like a huge missed opportunity to draw attention to this. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's I think the last thing I wanted to talk about on this movie, Matt. Couple good things here and there. But yeah, I think a big downgrade even from some of like the worst of the original series. I think this is either on par or possibly worse than the worst that the series has done, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. So even the bad ones of the original series, to me, got a little bonus for trying to do something kooky and sci-fi and fun
Yeah.
and cerebral.
Yeah.
This one was not trying to do anything interesting and then failed to do.
This is the worst of the early 2000s blockbuster filmmaking. Like just
Yeah.
these, as you said, these perfunctory, boring action movies just trying to make a quick buck off of existing IP that has so plagued the industry for decades and decades and decades. But I feel like this was happening a lot in the early 2000s. It is also wild to think that this movie came out the same year as Fellowship of the Ring. And it's
Yeah.
like that movie came out and said, no, this is how you do everything.
Yeah.
You're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You can't hang this movie.
Shame. Yeah.
Yeah. One more thing, just to connect back to the last movie, Battle for the Planet of the Apes. We got a comment from someone that said they wanted to hear our opinion of the final shot of that movie, which we didn't actually talk about, was that kind of epilogue stinger where the story of this whole movie is being read to us, and we see the stories being read to ape children and human children living in harmony. And we had perhaps not exactly, but possibly differing opinions on what that meant. The actual final shot of that sequence, though, Matt, that we forgot to mention, is we zoom in on the statue of Caesar and he's crying.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, very interesting symbol there, right? And does that change the interpretation of the scene? Is he like crying in disappointment at his failed attempt, or is he crying in happiness at the harmony of existence, of averted crisis?
I think it remains ambiguous. I mean, I kind of like it being ambiguous. So there's a thing I read, and I don't necessarily want to bring this in as like part of the interpretation because it isn't
Okay.
something in the movie, but it was something in the minds of the screenwriters. So I'll say it here and we
Okay.
can debate what to do with it. So it was like originally they wanted to end the movie with like ape children and human children playing on the playground or whatever. And then there's a you know, an altercation and they fight or there's a disagreement and then that's the end
Okay.
of the movie. I'm not remembering exactly the details, but basically that was the gist. Is we end on a note of like discord between the apes and the humans, and then that's the end. And it's like the cycle will continue. There will be no peace. And they didn't do that because they wanted a more of a pick me up ending. The studio did, or somebody wanted more of a pick me up ending, and so they had the ape children and the human children sitting there happily. But then I do think there's a shading of ambiguity of the ape, the Cornelius, the Caesar statue crying, which I think the screenwriters actually hated. By the way, they thought it was corny. Um,
I mean, it is a little corny, but
sure, I mean it's Planet of the Apes. So again, I don't know what to do with that. I don't like to put too much weight on like the screenwriter telling us what they meant because I'm like, okay, that takes away all the fun of us
sure.
having an interpretation. Um, I mean, I personally just like it being ambiguous. Like you
Yeah.
said, you sort of said exactly the thing at the beginning of like, well, tears don't mean sadness; they could mean, you know, hope or
Yeah.
you know, wistfulness or something.
Yeah. I mean, especially when they're coming from a statue that is not actually crying, and this is all supposed to just be symbology here, right?
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So just wanted to make sure we circled back around on that one. But from here, Matt, we move on. We move another decade and change into the future for another attempt at rebooting this franchise. I think we can call it a more successful attempt. We haven't watched all the movies yet, but we've seen most of them before, and just the fact that this was a one and done, and the next series has gone on for 4 movies now, seems like it was a more successful attempt. So that's where we're heading after this. We're heading to, oh shit, uh, Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
That's the
You
first one.
yeah. You rise before dawn. That's the mnemonic I thought of.
Okay, great. We'll always remember that now. So
Yeah.
that's where we'll be heading next. James Franco and Andy Serkis.
Love it.
So I'm pretty excited about this, Matt. I like these movies,
Me too.
so I'm excited to really. I mean, I think the thing I'm most excited to on this is that when I saw these movies originally, I had not seen the original series recently. It had been a while. And so I think as we immediately pointed out in Conquest, Rise has a lot of similarities. So I'm looking forward to seeing not only if these are good movies, which I think they are, but how they kind of fit in the overall continuity is not the right word, but the vibe of what the Planet of the Apes as a franchise is.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, so that'll be next week, and I think, Matt, we've been going for a while, so I think that's going to do it for us this week. I gotta say, we talked about this movie considerably more than I thought we were going to.
Yeah. I feel the same. Yeah.
But that's all we had for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, the whole series, or on chimpanzees as pets, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter at doofmedia. You can also head to the subreddit r/doofmedia where you will find a post for this episode and you can weigh in there.
Yeah. And if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find our episodes on iTunes, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at any of the available levels. You get to support us, you get to help us, and also you get a whole bunch of bonus privileges and content and all that good stuff. So please head over there. And when you're over there, say hey to us. There is like a chat feature on Patreon that I believe I have push notifications for that on my phone. So I should be able to get notified of that if you send one. But just say hey. We like to interact with you guys. So say hey.
Yeah, good stuff. Also, please consider tossing us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks. As we said, next week will be the first film in the next trilogy of Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Oh boy, computer graphics entering the fray. Will it fix the series or break it? We'll find out. We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.